All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Cosmic Connection. This is where we explore the order and the beauty of the cosmos and our connection to it all. My name is Amanda Walsh. I am the founder of Astrology Hub and the host of this show. I am so thrilled to be here with our favorite, Rick Merlin Levine. And yeah, favorite.
Aww. Aww.
And we have a topic today that has been inspired by several conversations that I've had with people in the last 3 days. And it's been so interesting because it's been a consistent theme. And it's people that are could be into astrology or were into astrology at one point, but they've been turned off for various reasons. So one of the people that I spoke to was super into astrology, all through her 20s, and then got turned off because she found that it was getting used to put people into boxes and reduce the amount of human exchange. You sort of make an assumption about people, put them in a box, and go, okay, I get that person, right? So that was one of them. And then the other, there's some other things that came up. So I said to Rick, can we do the top 5 misconception or misuses of astrology? And at first he said, sure, what are they? And then I saw him 3 minutes later and he had 5 perfect misuses of astrology that were very similar to the things that I was thinking of. Because when I heard these things from people, it actually hurt me because I realized how astrology can be used in a way that is not empowering. It is not, it's misused. So, Rick, let's start with misuse number 1.
Wait a minute. You know me.
I know.
Before we get to any misuses, I need to address this from a totally different perspective. This will be brief, I promise.
Yeah.
But our guy, Johannes Kepler, the person who's considered to be the father of modern astronomy, the hero of modern astronomers, because he figured out the laws of planetary motion when Isaac Newton said, I can see so far because I stand on the shoulders of giants. One of those shoulders was Johannes Kepler. Now, Johannes Kepler was written about. I grew up reading, because I was interested in science as a kid, about the biographies of these famous scientists. And Johannes Kepler was always presented as the first astronomer who kind of did astrology because he was paid to do it, but he didn't really believe in it. But he did it for the money. That's the way that it was presented.
Mm-hmm.
It turns out that one of the many books that Johannes Kepler wrote, but one about his understanding and belief or relationship with astrology, was a book called Tertium Inter Venus. And that's Venus not as the planet Venus, but inter Venus meaning in between. Tertium Inter Venus actually translates as third in the middle, or the third person, third man in the middle. And it's kind of like he's trying to stand in the middle between those people who think astrology is a bunch of crap and those who think that astrology is the way they think that astrology is, maybe misused. We'll come back to that in a moment. That's what's all important. And it was from this book, Tertium Inter Venus, that the phrase "don't throw the baby out with the bathwater" that came from Kepler writing specifically in response to several theologians, physicians, and philosophers that this is his words, when quite properly rejecting the superstitions of stargazing, do not throw the baby out with the bathwater, and therewith unwittingly undermine their own professions. For the necessary instruction of all true lovers of the natural mysteries.
Mm.
In other words, what he's saying is that astrology to the modern scientist, and modern, we're talking in the early 1600s to Kepler, was considered to be some sort of blasphemy against religion and the new ideas of learning. And yet there are many quotes that people have pulled out of this book that show Kepler did not have any what's the right word? He did not value astrology at all. Whereas the following is true. He hated the astrology that you and I hate. He hated the fact that people didn't know what astrology was. He hated the fact that the popes and kings and queens were using astrology to figure out when they should declare war. He hated the fact that the sons and daughters, and sometimes these kings and queens themselves, were using astrology to find out when they could or couldn't get laid. I mean, this is in his writing back 400 years ago. And so this was, so my point here is that the modern misuses of astrology are not modern. That as long as there has been astrology, there have been people misusing it. So that's kind of, before we got into the specific reasons, I wanted to say that, there are good English translations of Kepler's Third Man in the Middle, or Tertium Inter Venus. In it, there's just like one kind of clever, wise thing about what astrology is, followed by, something that people just don't get and don't understand. And he talks about heredity, and he talks about natal horoscope, and and he talks about how the baby actually receives an imprint from the cosmos, but it's kind of like an empty imprint that has to be filled in by the development of the soul. And so I really think that the first reason of the 5 reasons that I have, and I'm sure that viewers of this will have their own reasons, and I would love to see them in the chat box, because I have my 5 reasons written out. They're not going to be influenced by what someone else types or writes in. But I think that the first reason that popped into my head, which is not something that most people would think of, but I say that perhaps the greatest misuse of astrology is not by astrologers, but it's by those people who use astrology to ridicule something that they don't understand. And that is a total misuse of astrology. But the people who are misusing astrology that way are the newspaper reporters and the science writers and the scientists and many astronomers and mechanists who have no idea what astrology really is, and therefore they ridicule it. They make fun of people who actually think that there's something to it. And these people who do that know nothing about astrology, or what they know about astrology is perhaps about the same amount that you and I know about how to do open heart surgery. We know it exists, but somehow the people that do open heart surgery are considered to be great healers, mechanics, however you want to frame that. But no one says that they're doing these operations based on superstition. Well, maybe some people do, but but the fact of the matter is that I think that's the first, significant misuse of astrology.
So not so much a way that astrological information is misused, but the understanding of what astrology actually is, or lack of understanding. And then
if someone wants to poke fun at almost anything, they can pull astrology out as an example. of ridiculing something that then gets, lumped in with whatever they're trying to ridicule.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. All right. Well, what would you say is number 2?
Number 2, I think, is a bit more poignant to those who actually use or practice astrology. And that is one of the greatest misuses of astrology, I believe, is to relieve people of their own personal responsibility or culpability. It's to somehow blame it on the stars, or say, I'll never be that because I'm an Aries or a Taurus, or pick your sign. It doesn't matter. But I think that many people use astrology, whether they do it consciously or inadvertently, unconsciously. They use astrology as a way to either sidestep their own responsibility, or to basically tell a client, yeah, you've had all this happen, but it's in the stars. There's nothing you could have done about it, and there's nothing you can do about it. It's your horoscope. Your horoscope sucks, and therefore so does your life. Quit whining. Just, understand that this is your karma. You chose it. I think that's a horrific misuse of astrology.
Rick, where's the line on this, though? Because there are times where having that understanding of your quote unquote wiring is helpful, because it's like, well, that isn't necessarily my natural proclivity, but it's something, of course, I could develop. But you, for example, are really good at that. You're naturally wired that way. And sometimes having that understanding can be so helpful, because we're not trying to be who we're not.
Oh, I totally agree with that. Totally agree with that. But flipping that around, it's really oftentimes the horoscope shows the course of least resistance. And that's what makes humans versus a human being a termite, or a beaver, or any other animal, so to speak. Humans have the capability of redirecting their energy through practices, whether we call them spiritual practices or yogic practices, or through going to therapy, or being educated, taking a course of study. We have tools that enable us to take whatever the course of least resistance is and nudge that course slightly to the right or to the left or up or down, and therefore change our trajectory. And yet when we say, I'm like this because this is the way my horoscope is, you could find, 5 people with the same aspect, and one of them might end up being, muttering to themselves and being, the victim of a horrific life story and addiction, living on the street. And the other one may be the, a Nobel Prize winner, in a Nobel Peace Prize. Another one may be a great musician, and another one may suffer from depression, all with the same aspect. And what's the difference? The difference is, there are several differences. And of course, this goes much deeper to a conversation that we've had many times. And that is the conversation of fate versus free will, or nature versus nurture, if you will. But the fact of the matter is, yes, we are born with a chart, but no, there's no such thing as a bad aspect. And yet astrology comes from a very long history of making judgments of the nativity being the technical word for a birth moment, like we use the word for the birth of Jesus, but everyone has a nativity. And that's why in astrology, we call the person whose chart it is the native. That's the origin of that word in that context. But Saturn square Mars was once considered to be an affliction. Not my word, not my judgment. That is the word that was used to describe that aspect. Oh, this chart is afflicted because it has Mars square Saturn. And then you look at these great athletes or great military leaders or highly accomplished business people who have taken and harnessed that energy of working the gas pedal Mars and the brake Saturn in a way that gives them exquisite control of their vehicle. But by nature, it may not be an easy aspect because it's too hot or too cold or too pushy, not pushy enough. And so when someone says, I can't do that because I have this aspect or that aspect, or because I'm this sign, or because my moon is in, it's like, get me away from that, because that's just crazy talk. It's basically one of the greatest misuses of astrology. I remember my older and now deceased astrology partner in crime, Jeff Jower, did a lecture, a keynote address one year at Norwalk for the Saturday night main event banquet. And his address was, what if astrology ruled the world? It was not a pretty picture. I mean, all of a sudden Pisces couldn't get jobs as coders, as writing computer code, because they're obviously spacey. I mean, we make judgments. And so what happens is that when we use the generalizations in astrology, we basically end up kind of taking people's responsibility to do something with their life, to make something happen, to better themselves, to better their family, to leave the world in a better condition than it was when they entered it. Whatever these higher-minded principles are, this is what separates humans from animals. And obviously, people have different levels of this being touched by this energy. There are many people who struggle just to get food on their table and fresh water or even drinkable water for their families. And that in itself becomes a part of survival. But for those people who have food and water, it's what do you do next? And it's the same thing with a chart. Rather than just settling back into a chart and saying, I have Venus in Taurus conjunct Jupiter, so I actually have earned the right to lay around all day and eat sweets and watch television. That's crazy, because another person with that same Venus Jupiter conjunction in Taurus might end up contributing knowledge to how the body's sensory organs work, or may start a family business that employs 10,000 people who now earn wages from that person's efforts. So to just take any one thing and make it good or bad, and to make a person not responsible for their own being, because obviously the planets are what make you do things, that's a major misuse of astrology.
So, Rick, tell me if I was guilty of this today.
Oh, you probably were.
I think I was, because my daughters were having an argument. Sophia used Madeline's brush and didn't put it back in the right place. And Madeline was trying to get Sophia to answer to this grievance. Like, tell me why you did it. Tell me why you did it. I need to hear. And Sophia just went like this and just wasn't saying a word. And this drove Madeline crazy. And so what I said, which you're probably just going to cringe, Madeline's moon is in Gemini. When she's emotional and triggered, she needs to be able to talk about it. And when Sophia, moon in Scorpio, is emotionally triggered, she doesn't want to talk about it. And so they have this is a dynamic that happens all the time. I have found that being able to explain it with the astrology actually helps them understand each other a little bit better. Although this morning, Madeline goes, Scorpio moon, Schmorpio moon. I don't care where her moon is. I want her to answer my question. So am I guilty? And or is that helping them become more compassionate towards each other and each other's needs?
I don't know that I could answer that. If I were the judge, I would just say you're not guilty because I know you.
Thank you.
But I'm not the judge, and I don't know who is the judge. But I do know this. I think. Well, no, I don't know this, but I believe that intention has everything to do with it.
Okay.
And in your saying that, you weren't trying to limit either of their behaviors to that. You were simply suggesting that their natural inclination, again, we're back to the course of least resistance. So as a parent or as a counselor, you might go to the Scorpio moon and say, your natural inclination is to kind of hold your own power by not giving up anything around what your motives are. But that has its own layer of creating life that's more difficult for you sometimes. And I'm not saying you should always talk about everything, but sometimes it might be just absolutely relief for you to stretch out of your normal place and just simply say, well, it's because I forgot. Or it's because you piss me off and I hate that you have a better brush than I do, or whatever it is. And just in saying that, you might find, oh my God, that was so freeing, even if you get into an argument or whatever. And so there, what you're doing is you're saying, this is the course of least resistance, but it doesn't make you, but you're still responsible for being in a social situation where you've done something, by the same token, by, going to the Gemini moon and saying, it is your inclination to want to talk about everything. But if you're going to be happy in life, you're going to be confronted with the fact that that's only 1 in 12 ways of responding to a situation. And when someone doesn't want to talk about it, it might just be okay for you this one time to go, okay, and go on to something else. So in both of those cases, what you've done is you've said, this is the way the astrology would naturally lean you if you didn't have awareness. But now you have awareness, and your awareness of this natural proclivity, this natural habit, this natural way in which you template your cosmos, the order of things around you, that's not the only way. And it doesn't mean you have to do it other ways, but you'll be a healthier human being if you can at least be aware of the 11 other ways that can be done here, which then basically makes you responsible for the one way that you took.
Totally.
Even if it was the natural unconscious way.
Right. Exactly. And that's actually one of those conversations I had in the last few days that I was referring to in the beginning. The person was saying, well, you have awareness. Like, what good is that? Like, what good is the awareness? And what I said is, the awareness enables choice. It's not awareness to be like, oh, well, that's why, and I'm just going to stay there. It's like, oh, that's why, and I have a choice. I can stay there, or I can choose something else.
In the Foundations 1 course, I mentioned a book, and I didn't talk about it a whole lot, but I remember I took a quote from it, I think. And the name of the book was A Theory of Personality. A Theory of Personality by a psychologist named George Kelly. And I think this book was written in the late 50s or early 60s, before my time of being a psychology student, but a book that was came up in some course that I was in. And George Kelly makes the case for, it's not an astrology book. He's not an astrologer, nothing to do with astrology. But he makes the case that we all have views of the world that are based upon our upbringing, our culture, our family, our relationships with our siblings, our relationships with our parents and our teachers. We all have a way in which we look at the world. We can call this our world view. Everybody has a world view. You cannot make a decision in your life. You cannot make a choice unless the choice is within the construction of your worldview. You can't choose to get into a time machine and go back and redo something that you did unless you maybe are schizophrenic or just maybe a Back to the Future crazy mad scientist, unless you actually believe in your worldview that time travel is possible. That might have been a silly example, but he claims that the job of the therapist is to help the patient or the client alter their worldview so that they have choices that they didn't know they had. That's all we do in astrology. That's what awareness does. Awareness gives us the ability to make choices that we didn't previously have.
Yes. And I like how you said it. Choices we didn't know we had. We probably always had them. We just didn't know.
Well, yes and no. If we didn't know we had them, then we didn't have them.
True.
I'm not arguing with you at all, but it's a subtle thing that here it's the mental construct that is 100%. If there is something that's outside of our worldview, it is not a potential for making a choice in that direction. There's no road that goes there. How can we choose to go that way?
Exactly. And yes. Okay. Very good. We could probably go on with number 2 for a really long time, but let's go to number 3. So what we have so far is for the top 5 misuses of astrology. Number 1, using.
I feel like I'm on David Letterman.
Oh, great. Awesome.
Well, they would have the top 10 of everything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Okay. Number 1, use astrology to ridicule something they don't understand.
Right.
Number 2, relieve people of responsibility.
Right.
So, using it to be like, oh, well, it's because I have this, why my life sucks, or it's because of that, why I'm a jerk. It's because I have, Okay. Number 3.
To outsmart Mother Nature.
Ooh, good one. All right. Tell us what you mean by that.
Well, often clients come to the astrologer or come to me as an astrologer, but to the astrologer, saying, I want to do this and I need to know what the best time is to do it. This branch of astrology is called electional astrology, like an electional surgery. It's basically you're making a choice. That's what electional astrology is you're choosing a moment, you're electing to do something at a particular moment. And it's a branch of astrology. Astrologers often are employed to cast electional charts and to help someone find a good moment to be married or to start a business or to sign a home, buying a home or whatever. But what happens if a client comes to you and says, I'm looking for a good moment to rob a bank, or to or to whatever. Think of whatever evil
start a
thing.
War. I mean, the thing.
Sure. Yeah. Start a war. Start a war. And so one of my clients know this as one of Rick's axioms. And there's never a good time for a bad action. By the same token, and both of these might be overstated. There's never a bad time for a good action. In other words, there might be better times. Look, it's not, if you live in Minnesota, you do not plant your lettuce and your radishes in September or October. Dumb. Nothing's going to happen to them. So there are right times to do things. But there are layers and complexities of that. And yet often what happens is that we think that if we use astrology, that we can actually get shortcuts so that we don't have to do the work. Or that we can take something that is questionable as to whether it's good or bad or wise or unwise, And if we do it, while Venus is trining Jupiter, and Saturn is sextile the sun, or the sun sextile Saturn, that this will give it the foundation for it to become real and the possibility of it. But the bottom line is that Mother Nature doesn't like it when you mess with her. And so here's what happens.
Yeah.
And I've seen this happen with excellent astrologers, doing everything by the book correctly and helping someone choose a good wedding date. 15 years later, to have that marriage explode. And when you look at the charts of the two individuals and the chart of the wedding date, you can kind of see what happened. Now, you see, it's often much easier to look at a chart and see what you already know, or more often to see what you think you already know, than it is to see all the possibilities of all the potentials unfold. Just because a relationship ends, even a marriage, doesn't mean that it was bad. It doesn't mean that the date was bad. But often what happens is that there's what a psychologist calls reaction formation, meaning that it overcompensates. I've told this story before of someone who moved from the East Coast to Denver because this was a woman who had it with bad relationships or no relationships. And I don't remember all the nuances, but it put Venus on her descendant line, and something else that basically Jupiter maybe on her midheaven. And it was like, and so she moved to Denver because of her locational astrology or astrocartography. That's the Jim Lewis's term, that it's actually a copyrighted term. About 8 years later, her husband, she found someone, fell in love, got married, and her husband ended up going to jail for what do you call it when you swindle money, when you take money from a business?
Does anybody know? Tell us.
Where's my
chat.
brain?
Like right.
Yeah, basically, he got caught burying money for personal use out of a business to the tune of millions of dollars, and he ended up going to jail. She was married to him, so she ended up being bankrupt in the situation also.
Embezzling.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't know why I couldn't think of that word.
And Susan and Terry.
All right. Yeah,
and Morgana. Thanks. No, everybody's coming in. Yeah. Thank you, Karen. Everybody. Yes.
But what this person hadn't realized was that Pluto was, I think, on her IC, or Pluto was square her IC. I don't remember but in other words, we tend to look at things and we see the hope and we see the good things, and therefore when we act as if we're going to go somewhere to make the bad stuff go away, we don't know what else we're attracting or pulling in. And so I think that's again, there's a nuance here. The same thing about relieving people of their responsibility versus simply saying, well, a Scorpio moon might not be as forthcoming as a Gemini moon in all situations. I mean, that is not always true, but it's largely could be true. Now, when you say that, you can either say it in a way to make the person not responsible for their behavior, or to give them another layer or level of responsibility. By the same token, you can use electional astrology or locational astrology in a way that is a practice in growth. But to use it as if you're going to outsmart Mother Nature doesn't like to be with. It's like she'll get you. And so I think that it's a terrible misuse of astrology to use astrology in that way where we think that if every day we make the most important sales call of the day at the moment when Saturn is trining the ascendant, or whatever it might be, that there are disciplines and practices, and I'm not suggesting that we should never pay attention. In fact, I think paying attention is good. But again, it just becomes how much do we lean on astrology to make something happen? I remember many years ago, one of my best friends was a Methodist minister, and his daughter, at that time, she must have been about 13 or 14 years old. And she played on a boys' little league team, and she played shortstop. She was amazing. She was an incredible athlete. And she used to hang out when we talked about astrology and consciousness. And one day she said, I believe in astrology and it all makes sense to me. She says, but I don't want to know what's going to happen, because she goes, when I'm playing infield, and if I start thinking about, oh, this batter hits left-handed, the pitcher's always slowing to the right, there's someone on first base, I got to play this to second and then hope that then he gets it over to first. And she goes, if I get so much in my head because of all the pieces of information I have, the ball will come to me and I'll stumble over it. I won't know what to do. But if I don't think anything, and if I'm just there, I'm just there. If I'm just there, she goes, I never miss. Mm. There's a strong lesson there.
Yes. And it's true. We really can use astrology to get more in our heads, less in our bodies, more in a place where we're like you're saying, trying to calculate and strategize versus sink in and let it inform and actually confirm. Use it more as a tool to confirm what already feels true or what we already think we know.
I love taking pictures. I'm a competent photographer. And often I will go out with one or two cameras on my own for, a few hours a day, especially if I'm in a city, if I'm in Paris or in Bangkok or where, I just love going out with my cameras just to capture something. However, when I don't have my camera, I have a very different relationship with where I am. Because with my camera, I'm always looking for angles. And in fact, when I don't have my camera, I sometimes catch myself walking past something and then going back and going, no camera, but I'm framing it in my mind. And there's something about that relating to astrology. I know astrologers who will barely go to the bathroom unless the moon is in the right angle to something.
Right.
That knowing hour by hour what's going on just becomes information. And I've made, now granted, I'm a fire sign. I have a lot of cardinal energy. So what I'm going to say may not apply to everyone else. I get that. But I've made some of the best decisions in my life in a moment, without thinking, and based upon just being right there in the moment going, this is not a good idea. I don't want in. Why? I'm not sure, but I'm going to pass on this, and that's it. Or but I'm not saying I don't read information. I'm not saying that I don't, do my due diligence or homework on making most decisions, but there can be a point at which we have so much information because we think that if we have just one more fact, we can outsmart the odds. Mm-hmm. I know people who are gamblers. I grew up in a gambling town, Saratoga Springs, New York. It had the oldest running thoroughbred racetrack in the Western Hemisphere. Mm-hmm. It ran continuously, seasonally, but continuously from 1863. And I knew a lot of people who were major gamblers, mostly horses, thoroughbred racing. And everyone has a system. And everyone says, if I know this and if I know that, and the more information I know, and I've known a lot of those people who knew it all to have lost tons of money.
Yes. All right. So what would you say? I mean, the way that I think of it is it's a data point. So when we're making decisions about the best day to do something or the best, it's a data point that is really intelligent to consider.
Yeah.
However, basing the whole decision on it, it's just what I found more than anything is it, especially with like, let's take astrolocality. It'll be, wow, I've always been drawn to New Zealand, right? I've always been drawn to New Zealand. I was always drawn to New York. I was always whatever. And then the astrology comes in and just confirms that.
That's right.
Thing that we all have. It's like, I don't know why. I just have always been drawn to that place.
Yeah. Now, in all fairness, though, I mean, there are examples. This goes back to when I think we talked about this in a few sessions back. Evangeline Adams,
yes,
and when J.P. Morgan was one of her clients, and she was an astrologer, and she was being tried for blue laws in New York City that were that made fortune telling illegal, and he was deposed in her case, and that's where the line comes from. J.P. Morgan said, millionaires use their brains, billionaires use their astrologers. So I'm not suggesting that astrology can't better our odds, but I also think there are subtle prices that we pay when we out-trick things. I think of Ronald Reagan. Most people who know Ronald Reagan's story know that he has always been a fan, as many Hollywood types were and still are, of astrology. And that when he was elected governor of California, and I'm thinking that might have been 64 or 68 or somewhere right in there. My years might be off a little bit. But he was inaugurated at 1:30 a.m. And when you look at that chart, you don't have to be a very smart astrologer to realize when you look at Reagan's chart that moment was selected. No one gets inaugurated at 1:30 a.m.
Right.
And that through his presidency, they had a full-time astrologer, and Joan Quigley, who is someone who I didn't know, but I had met. And Joan Quigley picked every date and time of every meeting he had for nearly 7 years.
Wow.
When they would get on the plane on Air Force One and wait for 11 minutes until it was the time that Joan Quigley said to take off. Now, this is true. You can read about it, in her book. And also in one of the reasons why their chief of staff, Don Regan, is one of the reasons why he quit. He said that Nancy's astrologer had more to say over the daily schedule than he did. Now, obviously, something worked for Reagan. So, I'm not saying that I'm using double negatives. There is obviously something here of value. It's just we have to be careful about how far we take it and what we do with it, because there is a price to pay, whether it's karmic or whether it is pragmatic. It's like something happens. I mean, granted, Reagan went down in history as the Teflon president because all the shit went on around him and people went to jail for all kinds of corruption and all kinds of things. And he didn't have a news conference for 31 days. And then he did on a perfect day astrologically, and somehow it all worked out, and yet he lost his mind. By the end of his presidency, he was severe Alzheimer's, so I don't know.
Well, and it's each person has their own path with this. Some of us might need to take it that far to then have some of these realizations on our own. And, maybe that's just part of what we're doing as we're learning as we go. So,
yeah. And just full circle here. There are many astrologers who make their living by electional astrology and relocation, decisions. Right. I'm not saying that these services can't be useful or can't be helpful. Right. I'm just saying that it's not nice to outsmart Mother Nature.
Right. You're saying there's a potential pitfall there that it's good to be aware of, right?
It gets back to a word that we used, I think, here last week, and that word was theurgy, working with God rather than trying to outsmart God.
Right. Okay. Very good. Let's go to number 4, misuses of astrology.
To confine or define or limit people. Actually, when I started writing this, I had Bob Dylan's All I Want to Do Is Be Friends With You in the back of my head. And it was, I don't want to confine you, define you, or refine you. All I want to do is be friends, something like that.
Yeah.
But there's that whole sense of how we use astrology to put people in boxes.
Yes. Yeah. Like you hear someone sign and it's like, oh, okay, I know what's going on.
I got it. Yeah.
Oh yeah. Okay. I know who you are because I know that you're a Capricorn or
whatever. You're an Aries. You can't finish anything you start.
Right.
I mean, I heard that my whole life, and I look and I go, well, it's true that I start more things than I finish, but don't tell me I don't finish things, you know. But the point is that we can fall into that in our own self-awareness, but we can also do it in those people around us. I know I've said this quote before. I think in the relationship workshop, it's in my all-time favorite quotes, and it was George Bernard Shaw, English Irish playwright, said, "The only honest relationship I have is with my tailor. Every time he sees me, he measures me anew."
Oh.
It's an amazing quote.
Wow. Jeez.
And so what happens is that when we meet someone and we see that they're a Virgo, we're not measuring them anew. We're measuring them by basically taking the Virgo as the primary measurement and then watching how they deviate or don't deviate from that. The only honest relationship I have is with my tailor. Every time he sees me, he measures me anew. Brilliant line.
So how do we avoid this one? Because it's, once you know the archetypes and you really start seeing it and it really gets confirmed, and maybe that's confirmation bias, I don't know, but it's like, oh, okay, that really explains a lot. And I'm always coming from the standpoint of like, that explains a lot. It helps me know you more. It helps me understand you more. Not it helps me box you more, and like dismiss you more. I don't do it that way, but I know that is a definite potential. And also I can see this was one of the things that the young lady brought up to me was what she started doing was she stopped connecting with people as humans and giving them like a blank slate of like, I just want to get to know you. And before she knew anything about them, she already had them in like some sort of category. So how do we work with this? Because once you know, it's kind of hard to unknow.
Practice.
There you go. Yeah.
It's just it's a practice of, I've said this many times, here, there, everywhere. I feel like writing a song, here, there. And that is, astrologers, like people who believe or practice a fundamental religion, or modern scientists or modern Western doctors, astrologers believe they know more than they do. And so I look at your chart and I think I know more about you than you know about you. Sometimes
you do. No. Sorry, I take it back.
No, well, but what I know when I look at a chart is I know the course of least resistance, and I know one way in which that energy might express. And so I've done enough charts, I've gotten better at guessing how that energy might express, but I don't know you. I know you when I, like George Bernard Shaw said, I know you when I take your measurements anew. When I interact with you in the moment, I listen to what you're saying, and there's an interaction. That's where we know each other. I mean, as an astrologer, one of the things that I find that I've confronted, I mean, over the years, decades, is people thinking that I know them when I don't have a clue. If I'm looking at the chart, I know certain things about how their energy systems and dynamics work. But that doesn't mean I've ever walked in their shoes or know how, that particular aspect feels for them. And so, this whole idea of using this system to put a box around someone, or to, I had someone in my life used to say, a God defined is a God confined. As soon as we wrap the words around it, that's like it's like a brace. It's like something that holds us in place. Yeah. And we do that with ethnicity. We do that with racial generalities. We do that with nationalistic generalities, and we certainly do that with astrological generalities. And it's, how do we not do it? We just stop doing it. It's like, in other words, I can still hold on to what I think I know about Capricorn and interact with you and know that you have some Capricorn stuff in your chart, but I don't see you through that filter, nor do I see the parts of you that don't fit into that filter as not you. In other words, everything in someone doesn't have to fit into the filter that I think I have astrologically. Mm-hmm. And I have to be honest, people who know me know that I have a crazy memory for things that I've read. I really do. I remember things pretty well.
We all know that.
However, aside from knowing that you have some Capricorn in your chart, I know I've looked at your chart several times, many times. I could not tell you anything about your chart. Or for that matter, I could not say anything about the chart of most people who I know, either as friends or as ex-partners or business associates, or I have learned somehow that when I'm not looking at a chart, I can't put that chart in my mind. If I have your chart in front of me and I look at it and I immediately go, oh yeah, I remember. But I think it's dangerous when we interact with someone's chart rather than with someone.
Oh gosh, so good. I love this, what Meredith says too, because it brings us back to this idea of intention. But so she says, yes, Rick, practice and having the right intention, as in having a desire to be of service versus being right. And I think that's kind of what you're talking about here. It's like,
oh yeah, and in fact,
something.
I'm sorry, say it again. I was busy interrupting you.
Well, you're trying to confirm what you think you know, versus you're wanting to know, and you're using the information to help you know even more, and help you connect even more with a person. But go ahead. What were you going to
say? Two things. I in the astrology foundations too. One of the things that I kind of harped on is that when you're looking at someone's chart, there is no place for ego. This is not about you being right as an astrologer. And I recall the words of Jeff Jower, who always used to say, and I say it to almost every new client I see, Jeff used to say, when I'm with a client, I'd much rather be useful than correct.
Beautiful, yeah.
And so, in other words, when I say something about someone's chart, and I tell people at the beginning of a reading, if I say something and it's not right, do us both a favor and tell me right away. Mm-hmm. Or if I'm saying something that you're not connecting with, even tell me, because all I'm doing is I'm looking at pictures, I'm looking at symbols, and then I'm making shit up. Now, I'm making this stuff up in a very trained and rehearsed manner. It's not like I'm just making it up out of the air, but I'm telling stories based upon how this can come together. My goal is to connect you, your personal energy, with the cosmos, with the cosmic story. And if I say something that's not connecting you, rather than being wrong, I don't want to be right. I want to be useful. So I want another stab. I want to find the way that you connect with this that may not have been something that I even thought of. And I can't tell you how many times to a client I've said, so when I said that, what were you thinking? What made it so wrong? Can you, and they'll say something, they go, God, that's it. Well, this is how you take that energy of Uranus and that energy of the moon. And wow, it's not the way I would have thought it happens, but do you understand how these two planets are coming together in this, and this is what you're doing? And the person goes, oh my God, yeah, wow. So I think that's part of the beauty of astrology, is that when we don't use it as a language to tell someone who they are, or more importantly, who they are not, who they can't be. You don't know who or what someone can't be, because the mind can do anything. It may take more work for someone to do something that's not exactly in apparent character with his or her or their chart, but that doesn't mean that they can't. And the fact of the matter is that there are so many things out there. There aren't just 7 visible planets. There aren't just 10 planets going out to Pluto. As I've said many times, NASA tracks about a half a million things going around the sun. And if everything is connected to everything, as we astrologers claim to believe, then that means everything. And if we're talking about everything, what about all those galaxies out there, and those black holes and quasars and pulsars and radio sources and Seyfert clusters and globular clusters and all these things? And so for us to look at a chart and think, to have the audacity, the hubris, to think that we know what that person is, or how they should or shouldn't feel, or what they should or shouldn't be. Next.
Oh gosh, can we quote you on that? Okay, so good. All right, so I know,
Amanda, you seem not to need my permission. You can quote me on anything.
All right, so if this was Letterman, we'd probably go to a commercial before we get to number 5, right? But we're not going to do that. So we have number 1 is using astrology to ridicule something they don't understand. Number 2, relieving people of self-responsibility.
Relieving,
yeah, right. Number 3, using astrology to outsmart Mother Nature, or to attempt to outsmart Mother Nature. And number 4, to allow astrology, or to use astrology to confine, define, put people in boxes.
Yeah, and even describe. Oddly enough, the word describe means to put a circle around.
So it's not a box, but it's a circle.
yeah. So what I'm saying is that technically, a description is a limiting factor. Anyhow, number 5, but I think we might have done these opposite, because when I did these, I took these from this is the most, I don't know. So maybe this, this
is the least important.
Who knows? But this is an important one. And what I had for number 5 is I have to manipulate or control others.
Ooh,
and
good one.
It's a big one. And it's one that, so many people that I know do astrology would never even think of doing that. And yet astrology has a history. And there are people who both used and abused astrology for that purpose. There are people who also feared the astrologer. In history, how many astrologers have been killed by the kings or royalty they served, when the king or royalty felt that the astrologer was trying to, manipulate them, or put fear around something, and steer them in a certain direction.
Well, that is a huge one. And you can even see it happen in the chat here under our videos sometimes. There will be someone who comes in and goes, and starts chatting, and you all know when this is happening, and I hope you don't respond to them, but there's the people that will come in and go, oh, I have a special message for you based on your chart, or, oh, I think I like your energy. Reach out to me for a reading. Or, it's this using this, oh, I have the all-seeing eye. I can tell you what you need to know, and preying on people's insecurities or their desire to be seen, or there's a lot of things that someone in control or power can play on, and the astrologer becomes someone in power when they're using it that way. When they're using it like, look, I have this map. I can tell you things about you that you don't even know. I can tell you things about your future. And here's why you need to listen to me. And yes, that can be very, very manipulative.
Well, and then we take that to the other level, which we do see not as much in the United States anymore as we once did, but it's huge in other countries. In India, not a day goes by when some astrologer is not tried and found guilty, of bilking money from someone because you need to pay me thousands of dollars, or your 3 children are going to die in a fire, and I can basically undo that. We kind of say, well, who would believe that? The fact of the matter is many people. And even in this country, I keep myself on a few email lists that I only keep myself on to remind me of the astrology that I never want to do.
Totally.
I get an email every day, and I'm not going to use any names here, but I get an email every single day that basically offers for me putting spells on someone to prevent them from leaving me.
Whoa.
And these are couched in modern. This is not something from some a place buried in the past, but I get stuff from astrologers every day that say something like, if you don't get this report today, you'll miss out on the love of your life, the opportunity of your life. I'll get things that say, Rick Levine, you are a fool if you miss this opportunity. And again, I get a handful of these only because I don't want to lose sight of the fact that stuff is actually there, and it doesn't go away. And it's crazy how intense that and how much money those people apparently obviously make. Otherwise, they would not be doing this.
Exactly.
It really is kind of crazy. And like I say, as we're talking, I'm just scrolling backwards in my email for one day. I see three emails like this that are, basically variations on the same theme, that if you don't do something right now, you will miss the opportunity of your life. And so there we're talking about manipulating people for money. This is specifically about basically talking people out of their money. And it's amazing how much of that there is. I get one or two of these, but the way things that are, the way things are read, this is the day you can be absolutely certain the planets are backing you up now. There's no reason to put this off, kind of
There's
a thing.
No reason to give you all. There's no reason not to just buy this thing that we're selling you right now.
Right now, because we know who you are, because we have your chart, because we know your astrology, because we are manipulating you to do something based upon something that you can't understand, but we can, because we have the corner on this reality that you can't possibly ever know. And it's really it's kind of crazy, but it's big. It's definitely an important thing that people misuse astrology for, and it's not going away. I mean, it's certainly there, and you see it all over. Not only like in a chat room where people are saying, I got your vibe, direct message me so I can give you the reading that you need to know that. But you see it again and again, people just bringing their negativity, their fears onto someone for some reason that may or may not be valuable.
It just confirms why we're doing what we're doing, because it's to have a place where people can come and get actual, real, solid, quality astrology. I remember when I was new in this, it was like I was either seeing those things, when I was new to astrology, I was seeing those things you were talking about, those like, really? Like, that doesn't feel good. That doesn't feel right. Or y'all would be having these conversations that I couldn't follow at all. I was just like, oh my God, right. What are they even talking about? Like, I really like this astrology thing, but I have no idea what they're talking about. So it was like, how do we create a place where it can be honoring of the receiver and meeting them where they're at, understanding that they don't totally know the language yet. Yeah. So that stuff is happening. And I'm glad you brought that up.
So that whole idea of using astrology to manipulate others, especially others who have money or power, and we've seen this. This is really why there are so many blue laws that are either still in existence or have now been taken off the books because of the abuse, of the classic fortune teller, with a turban. That in some way they do a reading and they see all this horrible stuff and they go, well, I can fix this. And before you know it, the person has paid them thousands or maybe even tens of thousands of dollars trying to remove that or to remediate, I think would be the word they would use to get rid of that terrible energy that is on them. And that may or may not be astrology. There are certainly other fortune telling tools that are pulled into that kind of quote unquote scam, but astrology is often a piece of it or a part of it.
What would you say to people who sometimes aren't sure, like, is this legit or is this not legit? What would you say a quality astrologer with integrity would never do? It's kind of like, we would never solicit you we would never tell you need something, or what would be the things that you would say just to watch out for people?
Well, a couple of things. One is, if you have any doubt at all, I would immediately, run a Better Business Bureau check on a person. I would ask the astrologer, where did they learn their astrology? What are their credentials? What organizations have they, belonged to? And just kind of get a sense of that, because most reputable astrologers will have a reputable history, so to speak. And so that would be one thing. But I would also want everyone to know that no reputable astrologer will have someone pay great sums of money for them to fix something. That just doesn't happen. And even for that matter, if I went to an astrologer and they started telling me these negative things and all these horrible things, I would get the hell out of there. I would know that because it's not that there can't be difficult things, but as soon as an astrologer starts talking about piled up stuff that's karmic, that's happening to you, that you need to do something to change things, or this is going to, those are all to me huge red flags. Big
another red flag is the whole, hey, I'm looking at our synastry and our charts are so good together. And
wait, that's what you told me.
Oh no, shoot.
You've been busted.
I've been busted. No, but that I've heard that happen, especially to women, where men are reading their charts. And I'm not saying all this all the time, but it's kind of like, hey, like we'd be really good together kind of a vibe, which also, I don't know, for me feels pretty creepy. It's like someone coming to you with like, I need some guidance on my life. And now you're hitting on me based on our charts. Like that feels really gross.
Yeah, really creepy. And of course, then this brings up a whole lot of issues around ethics in astrology. Again, it was one of the topics that we delved into in the level 2 course. But as soon as an astrologer uses his, her, or their position to be superior, to be power, and to depower the client, or the in whether it is fiscal, money related, whether it is sexual, whether it is just a matter of power, or if you're gonna get through this, you need to schedule an appointment with me once a week for the next 6 weeks, and we'll figure out a way to get out of there. Get a therapist, not an astrologer. Now, that might be different if the astrologer you're seeing is a licensed counselor and has a master's in, let's say, family counseling, and is very upfront that I use astrology as part of my therapy, and I think that I have something that I can offer you. There's nothing wrong with that. But right. The astrologer who's kind of trying to ring you in
to this. Yeah,
to this sense of urgency that you're not going to be okay
without
without my interference.
Yeah.
It's like the priest basically saying that without my coming between you and God, you're going to hell. I can intercede, for you. Mm-hmm. And the astrologer is just crazy. That's not what astrology is about. And yet all this comes back to that reason 5. Which in some ways is about the manipulation and or the trying to use astrology to gain power or to get something from someone that is really outside of what it should be.
Yeah, the power play for sure. I think it was perfect that was number 5, actually. So, and people are saying thank you. And also, I think there's a troller in the chat right now soliciting people, which is hilarious. Like hilarious, but not really. Stop it. Don't do that here. And don't respond, you guys. All right. So we have using astrology to ridicule something they don't understand, relieving people of responsibility, of self-responsibility to like actually make choices and make choices about their life. So letting them be like, well, I do that because I have this and I'm excusing my own behavior and I can't be any other way because that's the way my chart is. 3, outsmarting Mother Nature. So using like, I can't do this at a certain time because of this. And the only time I'll do these behaviors is when these certain things are in alignment. And I'm trying to, outsmart the natural flow of things with my knowledge and with my understanding. That's another way of saying almost like trying to manipulate Mother Nature, right? So it's still this like having actually power over Mother Nature versus power over another person.
Yeah, well, it's all that also brings in, and this is some of the things that I was meaning to reference in some of those emails that I get from astrologers. Mm-hmm. It's that I have a tool that no one else has. I have a technique. I have a system. In fact, I'm looking at an email right now that says urgent. He may be falling out of love. Here's the fix.
Oh God.
No, but I keep myself on these lists so I can actually remember that there are people that think like this. Right. The secret tool that inspires romance and affection in a man every time, no matter how distant he's been, you can turn things around fast. Act now by this.
it's just so sad. I'm imagining this person that's feeling insecure and desperate in their relationship, and they see that come in, and it's like, oh, maybe this is the answer. Maybe they know something that I don't. And it's just really brutal. Yeah. Okay. Thank you for sharing that. So number 4 was to confine, define, put people into boxes, forget about humanity, forget about like giving people a chance to just show up as they are without all of your ideas of who you think they
using
are.
astrology to limit and narrow perspective rather than to widen it.
Yes, exactly. And number 5, to manipulate or control others. And we just went into that. So good. Rick, thank you for doing this topic. I just felt so much inspiration around it. And then the conversations I had were really confirming that this is up and that we should talk about it. So I'm so grateful that you were game. Thank you. Have you ever
suggested something that I've said no?
No, but you've been kind of like, I'm not that into that. Or I don't know enough about that for that to fill an hour, which I usually call BS on because we find a way to talk about something for an hour that you thought would be done in 5 minutes, which I always laugh. Yeah. But thank you so much. Thank you. Your wisdom and your ability to all the experiences that you've had and your ability to see what happens and the places where people fall into traps. It's helpful for all of us, no matter where we're at in our journey. So thank you for that.
Well, we just have to remember that with astrology, we do have a very powerful tool. Yeah. It is something that does take us outside of ourselves. And it is something that, power is a double-edged sword. Knowledge is a double-edged sword. Knowledge doesn't necessarily make you wise. It makes you knowledgeable. And yet to practice astrology without a bit of wisdom is a very dangerous thing. And so, I think knowledge is great. I'm a great fan of being smart, of knowledge. And yet I'm also a great fan of, as the Dalai Lama says, compassion, kindness, wisdom. So
with great power comes great responsibility. So, right. So just knowing where the dangers lie helps us to make sure that we're making different choices. So, Rick, I know that you have your Instagram. You want people to check that out?
Always Rick Levine Astrologer for the daily pulse, the daily planet pulse, which is just kind of an overview of the energy of the day in one, usually around a couple hundred words of kind of like blog, along with a picture and a quote, because I am a incurable quoteaholic.
Your quotes are so great. Sometimes I'm just like, this quote alone is gold for this day, or just great reminders of wisdom. Yeah, it's so well done. And also, if you love this show, if you love the Astrology Hub podcast, thank you for sharing it with your friends. Thank you for sharing it with other people who can learn from Rick and from the other astrologers we have on the Astrology Hub podcast.
Some pretty amazing astrologers in your crew too.
God, and I'm just so grateful. I mean, there's even more like that just keep coming out of the woodworks. I'm like, gosh, you guys are amazing. Thank you. And just thank you for entrusting us with your wisdom, because we can see how it can be misused. We just spent the last hour and whatever minutes talking about it. So, okay, that's subscribe to the show. Whatever platform you use to watch it, listen to it. Just make sure you hit that little like subscribe button. If you're on Facebook, if you're on Instagram, you're already following us probably. And then if you have time to leave a review, that would be awesome too. Because when you leave your review, then other people see it and then they're more likely to tune in. It also helps the show get seen by more people. So if you can do that for us, that'd be great too.
Yeah, and incidentally, on my Instagram page, if you go to my bio, to my link tree, which is attached to the bio, there's a link there that'll take you to a page of every cosmic connection that we've done on one page, so that you can scroll down, see the topics, and watch whichever ones you might have missed over the past year. There's about 40 of them now, I think.
And they're all that. I mean, literally, you guys, I want to make a book out of these. And Gail, are you listening? But the
She
wisdom,
is.
she is, yes. Okay, good. There's so much wisdom shared in every episode. And even if it seemed like a timely episode that was like specific to a forecast, you're going to learn things in the way that Rick talks about the energy of that time, even if that time's over. So I highly encourage you, if you haven't checked out the backlog of Cosmic Connections, like have a Cosmic Connection binge day, and you'll just, I mean, it's endless. How much we do that with Netflix, right? Why not with Cosmic Connection?
As long as there's dark chocolate and red wine, why not?
Oh yeah, exactly. Make it even more delicious. Perfect for Venus and Taurus, right? Okay, thanks everybody for being here. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of our community. We love you. We appreciate you. Thank you for making astrology let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to weave in what we talked about today, because I always say thank you for making astrology a part of your life. Thank you for using astrology responsibly and making it a part of your life.
Well done.
All right. We'll catch you on the next episode. Thanks, everybody. Thank you, Rick.